Hello and welcome back to the last part of this quick tutorial for the Aerosoft Airbus. As you can see on our navigation display, we are now almost 20 nautical miles away from our top of descent, and the important thing in the Airbus is that you give it enough time to do the managed descent. So I usually dial in the next altitude constraint. I have no air traffic control on, so I'm going to dial in 3,000 feet, and I start the descent by clicking left on the on this knob, and I usually do that about 15 or 10 to 15 nautical miles before the top of descent. So this is important because this way you give the airplane enough time and space to do its managed descent. So let's do this right now. It is a little bit abrupt, I think, but maybe that's realistic, I don't know. And what I'm going to do now is I'm also switching on the fasten seatbelt sign. So we are now descending into our approach to Copenhagen, and what we can do now is we can prepare the approach. So we'll go to the MCDU. I'm bringing that up with Shift 2 to the performance page, and we are now in the descent phase, and I'm going to the next phase, and this is the approach page. So I already know the QNH. This hasn't changed because it is a static weather theme. It's 1018. The temperature I have to guess because, as I told you, I'm not using real weather because the real weather right now here is very bad. Or it's wrong to say here, but I know that the weather is really bad today, so it's rainy, and I don't like the rain effect of prepared, so I'm leaving that off. Let's say it's 0.5 degrees and the wind is 0, 0. Okay, so there's no wind. The transition altitude will be 7,000, and now the decision height, you go for that here. So you have to decide, you want to go for a barrow decision height depending on your barrow setting, or a radio. I always go for radio, and I'm dialing, because we're very light, I'm dialing in a decision altitude of 150 feet. That's sufficient in my opinion. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So you can now select the landing configuration. You can either select config 3, which gives you a approach speed of 135 knots and a landing speed of 130 knots, or full flap landing, which gives you an approach speed of 132 knots and a landing speed of 127 knots. There's plenty of runway here for us in Copenhagen, so I'm going to go for a config 3 landing. The only thing you have to go for when you do a config 3 landing is you have to go to the overhead panel and switch on landing flap 3. Okay, that is important. You have to do that. And you can see here that the ground proximity warning system has switched to a flap setting of 3. So we are pretty much set up for our landing in Copenhagen. There's nothing left to do for now, so I am returning to you as soon there's something interesting to do. So see you in a minute. Okay, so this is the part where it starts to get interesting again. You can see we're now at almost 10,000 feet. The airplane now automatically slows down to 250 knots. You can see that it reduced the descent rate and is now descending or reducing speed to 250 knots. It tells me more drag, so I'm putting out the speed brakes, and hope that it will. I'm leaving them out until we're established on our descent again. So in 10,000 feet is the point where you should switch on the landing lights. I'm already switching on the taxi light. I know that's unrealistic, but I don't want to do that in the final approach phase, so we're done with that. You know, you see, that's the problem about flying these planes in flight simulators, because in the real plane you have a second pilot that does a lot of the stuff you have to do here alone. He does for you. So I think that flying those planes really realistic is not very easy, because you have a lot of tasks you have to perform that usually someone else does. Okay, so we're switching on the LS button here. That's what we need for our ILS approach. And the unfortunate thing is it's going to be a very short approach. I don't have much time to show you all the specifics. So what I usually do right now, you can see that on the navigation display there's this decelerate point. That's the point where you should reduce speed to reach your final approach speed of let's see, of these 135 knots. Okay, but as always, oh, this is the famous Horizon Bridge. It's a beautiful scenery by Flight Tampa. Okay, and yeah, just always do things early enough. Okay, just with the descent and with the reducing of the speed, just do it early enough, because if you don't do that, you will have a lot of stress getting all the speed out of the airplane, and maybe you will have an unstable approach, so you have to go around, which isn't very yeah, it's not that good. So 7,000 feet, we are going to QNH of 1018, and yeah, we are pretty good on our descent right now, because I know that at the deceleration point we should have around 5,500 feet. That is very good. So of course you can fly all this manually if you want. There's no need to do this automatically, but I want to keep things as simple as possible, so I'm doing it kind of semi-automatic. Okay, so you can already see this scenery from Flight Tampa, which is a part of the city and the airport. You can see loads of textures now. It's very beautiful. Don't know why this bridge stops here. Whatever. Yeah. So I am now dialing in a speed of 200 knots. As I said before, I don't want to be late with reducing the speed. So, and you see on the primary flight display, this mark, the yellow mark, is the point where you can extend flaps 1, okay, not earlier. You don't want to have any damage on the flaps, okay? So, as soon as I'll be passing this point, I am switching flaps to 1. See? The red line was a little bit early, but it's okay. Okay, so now we should arm the spoilers. I think you can also do it with the mouse. Yeah, right click. Alright. Further reducing speed to 190 knots. That's weird, he just corrected the navigation line. Okay, now I am, if it's not already activated, it's already activated. Okay, the airplane does that automatic. You can activate the approach phase here as well, but usually it does that, or it does that automatically. Okay, I'm further reducing the speed to 170 knots now, because we are going to do a sharp turn in a minute now. And I'm going to flaps 2. Alright. So there's this sharp turn now, and as soon as we do the turn, I will switch on the approach button. And what I always do with the landing is I let the auto throttle manage the speed, and the last 2,000 feet I usually do the manual approach. But it's very convenient to let the auto throttle manage the speed, because if you don't, you sometimes have I think that it's rather hard to manage the speed in the Airbus. So probably you should use that, because it gives you very exact speed. So switch on the approach button. You can see the localizer is captured. The glide slope isn't captured yet. That gives us time to further reduce our speed to 160 knots. Extend the landing gear. Switch on the second autopilot. And extend flaps 2, 3. So we are almost in our landing configuration. We're going to reduce the speed further to our approach speed of 135 knots. Okay, so leave everything as it is. This is your small checklist for the landing. So we have our we can also switch on the terrain display if you want. You don't need it here, but alright, looks good. So wait for the airplane to stabilize a little bit on your approach path. We are at almost 2,000 feet now. So, and as soon as you're hitting 2,000 feet or a little bit below, you can switch off the autopilots, but leave on the auto throttle, okay? So just switch them off, cancel the warning, and take a good look at the ILS markers here. You could also switch on the ILS markers here. This gives you a little bit more exact readings, but don't do anything. And if everything stays this way, don't change anything, okay? Don't change the pitch, don't change the roll. Just leave it as it is, as long as it's as stable as this, okay? And if you do some corrections, just only do small corrections, because doing too much, correcting too much will give you an unstable approach, and it will be hard to correct that, okay? So just do small corrections. I'm a little bit above the glide slope, so I'm just pushing it a little bit down. And as soon as it will tell you the decision height, you will say continue. That's your decision to do the landing. Okay, and it will also
too high.
That's not right. And it will also tell you the what's it called? The point where you should where you should reduce the throttle to 0 to idle, and that is the it's a sound that it's retard, and that's the point where you should reduce the throttle to 0 to idle. Okay, so you can
500.
I'm a little bit right of the runway. I am now correcting that with the rudder.
400.
Shouldn't do too much rolling here, because that's dangerous in this phase of the flight.
300.
Glide slope.
Yeah, a little bit below the glide slope, I know.
100 above.
Glide slope.
Continue. He didn't say minimums, but I say
200.
continue. Okay, see a little bit left of the runway now.
Glide slope.
Okay,
Minimum.
correct it with the rudder. Continue.
100.
Now put your hand on the throttle.
Long landing.
Yeah,
Long
it's okay.
70.
landing.
60. 50. 40. 30.
Retard.
20. Retard. 10. 5.
Flare. Okay, I'm a little bit right, I know. So reverse thrust. I'm sorry, I landed a little bit right, a little bit far right. So, okay, let it reduce the speed to around 60 knots.
1,200 meters remaining.
Switch off reverse thrust.
900 meters remaining.
40 knots, reduce the ground speed further to around 10 knots. And leave the runway. Okay, so as soon as you're done with that, as soon as you left the runway, you're going to do a small cleanup of the aircraft. We're disarming the spoilers, we are reducing the flaps to 0, we are switching off the landing lights, leave the taxi light on, switch off the wing lights, switch off the strobe lights, and switch on the APU, because we're going to need that at the gate, or you can use ground power, of course. And switch off the flap 3 mode, and the terrain, we don't need that anymore. Okay, so I'm not going to show you all the taxi to the gate. I'm sorry for the landing, which was a little bit off to the right, but I think you got the hang of it, you saw the important things. So once again, I thank you for watching this quick tutorial. I hope that it will help you do your first flights with this wonderful Airbus from Aerosoft. And until the next time, I wish you, as always, happy landings.